Today, we're cracking open a declassified file that honestly reads more like a spy novel than a government document. But it's all true. This is the story of Project FUBELT, the CIA's secret plot to bring down a democracy in Chile. It's a pretty shocking question, right? But back in 1970, for the US government, this wasn't just some hypothetical. It was a problem that needed a solution, and the plan they came up with was methodical, secret, and absolutely ruthless. And this order? It came from the very top. In a 1970 meeting about Chile, President Richard Nixon gave his CIA director a command that was as simple as it was chilling: make the economy scream. Those 4 words kicked off a secret war against a sovereign nation. So, what triggered all this alarm in Washington? Well, it all comes down to one man, Salvador Allende. In September of 1970, he became the first ever Marxist to be democratically elected as a head of state in Latin America. Now, at the height of the Cold War, you can bet that sent shockwaves all the way to the White House. You know, the thinking inside the Nixon administration was layered. The biggest, most obvious fear was having a second Cuba in the Western Hemisphere, someone aligned with the Soviet Union. But they were also really worried about the precedent this could set. I mean, what if other countries, maybe even in Europe, saw that a socialist government could be voted into power peacefully? And of course, bubbling just beneath the surface were huge U.S. economic interests, especially in Chile's massive copper industry. So, to deal with this Allende problem, the U.S. came up with a really deceptive 2-track plan. One part of the plan would happen out in the open through all the official diplomatic channels. But the other part, that was going to be a war fought completely in the shadows. Okay, so let's break this down because the strategy was basically two-faced. Track 1, that was the public face, the diplomatic play. It was run by the State Department to mess with Chilean politics and spread propaganda. But track 2, that was the real plan. This was a covert war run by the CIA with the codename Project FUBELT. And its only goal wasn't diplomacy. It was to create a coup climate. This track was so secret, they deliberately hid it from their own U.S. ambassador in Chile. And if you want to know just how serious they were about this plan, all you have to do is follow the money. Nixon personally authorized $10 million for the operation. Now, in 1970 dollars, that was a huge amount of money, all dedicated to a single goal that was never written down: making sure Salvador Allende would never actually govern Chile. So the main objective of Project FUBELT was to trigger a military coup. But there was one big problem, one man standing in the way: General René Schneider. He was the commander-in-chief of the Chilean army, and he was a die-hard constitutionalist. He believed the military's job was to stay out of politics. So the CIA decided he had to go. The plan was as simple as it was brutal. Step 1, pinpoint Schneider as the main obstacle. Step 2, find some local help. The CIA found and supplied a group of Chilean military officers with cash and weapons to do the job. And step 3, create absolute chaos. The idea was that his kidnapping would be blamed on leftists, which would create panic, that coup climate, and give the military the perfect excuse to seize power. But the whole plot went disastrously wrong. On October 22, 1970, the CIA-backed group tried to kidnap General Schneider. He fought back, drew his own gun, and they shot him. He died 3 days later. The assassination had the exact opposite effect of what the CIA wanted. Instead of creating a coup climate, it horrified the Chilean public and actually solidified support for Allende, who was inaugurated soon after. The CIA's first secret war had failed, and failed spectacularly. But the U.S. didn't just pack up and go home. For the next 3 years, they kept up the pressure, continuing to make the economy scream. They funded opposition media, they funded labor strikes, anything to destabilize Allende's government. And all that pressure finally boiled over in the violent military coup of September 11, 1973, which brought General Augusto Pinochet to power. The human cost of the regime that followed, well, it was just staggering. Over the next 17 years, more than 3,000 people were confirmed to have been killed by the state or were disappeared, which means they were taken by government agents and their families never saw them again, never found their bodies. And it wasn't just the people who were killed. An estimated 38,000 people survived as political prisoners. Many were systematically tortured in secret detention centers, suffering horrific abuse for no other reason than their political beliefs. And all of this was done by a brutal military dictatorship that would rule Chile with an iron fist, crushing any form of dissent or civil liberty for 17 long years. Now, under the protection of this dictatorship, something else was happening in the background. A group of economists who came to be known as the Chicago Boys were given total freedom. They were trained at the University of Chicago, and they essentially used Chile as a real-world laboratory for a radical economic experiment. Sheltered by the military regime, they implemented a kind of economic shock therapy. They privatized basically everything they could get their hands on: state-owned companies, public utilities, even the entire social security system. They slashed trade barriers and gutted public spending on things like health and education. Now, these radical reforms did eventually lead to economic growth. Some even called it the miracle of Chile. But it came at a huge cost, ripping apart the social safety net and creating massive, deep-rooted inequality that lasts to this day. And that really brings us to today. Because in Chile, the events of the 70s and 80s aren't just settled history. They are a living ghost that still haunts the country, shaping modern politics and dividing its people. I mean, just look at these numbers. Even now, more than 50 years later, Chile is fundamentally split on the legacy of the coup. A poll from 2023 shows that 42% of Chileans believe it destroyed their democracy, but a nearly equal number, 36%, believe it was a necessary evil that saved the country from Marxism. And what about the United States? Well, for its part, the U.S. has moved toward transparency, declassifying thousands of documents that prove its role in all of this. But to this day, there has never been a formal apology for Project FUBELT or for its role in undermining Chile's democracy. So the story of Chile leaves us with this one very heavy question. It proves that the consequences of these secret wars, they don't just last for a few years. They can echo for generations, creating divisions that a country may never fully heal from. It really makes you wonder, when a foreign power gets involved, how long do the aftershocks truly last?